It's a great pleasure and honor for me to have the discussion with someone for whom I have great respect. And actually, Prime Minister, we met the first time nearly 40 years ago.
When we were kids.
When we were kids, exactly, when we were kids. And now we have you here. You have been in Davos already in the 90s, and now you are here as in a dual capacity as the Prime Minister of your important country, Malaysia, but also as the chair of the ASEAN countries. And I will have a number of questions, but I don't know whether you want to address the audience first shortly, and then I will come back with my issues, or should we go immediately into a dialogue?
Dialogue's fine. You're the boss here.
Thank you. Now, first, talking about maybe your country. You are one of the fastest growing countries, and I think you had many opportunities to explain to the people your economic objectives. I want to hear about your vision of propelling Malaysia into the intelligent age. I think you have made special efforts really to secure leadership in some way in the digital field, and the new agreement also with Singapore, your efforts for semiconductor industry. How do you see Malaysia as a future player in this area?
Thank you, Prof Schwab. You know, you gave that vision 30, 40 years ago, although they didn't mention AI at that time.
Yeah.
But you made, I think, this projection. Not all economists have the right projection, but I think you are quite an exception, because you have been driving this new technology so that we keep up the pace. I'm your student, so we took that seriously. So once we assume this position, my team then focus on utilizing what we have. We are quite fortunate because the semiconductor, although the back end, has been there for the last few decades. So both the ecosystem, the ports, airports, the workforce, and the supply chain has been minimal. So we ventured into the higher plane. So now Malaysia, together with some of our neighboring countries, have become the hub for semiconductor. Now comes the AI. AI is of course, a new challenge. We don't have the expertise, know-how. So we are fortunate because of the stability, political stability, and clear policy prescriptions in economic Madani. We then encourage and provide enough incentives for all the big players are there, yeah. Mainly cumulatively United States and Europe, including Infineon, which is very huge investments in that area. Then China coming in. We have to navigate, and AI, National AI Office, legislation, data protection, and whatever it takes to make sure that we are fully and equipped. By AI means changing the education system, health services, blockchain.
Exactly.
So it will have to come about. And we are pushing it at a pace, at a faster pace, partly because of my age. I don't have time to wait.
That's the reason, Prime Minister, why we call it the intelligent age. It's not just AI. I think it's much more comprehensive, and we are entering now, as I mentioned, from the industrial to the intelligent age. And I think here Malaysia, also with its young population, can play a major role, and for the semiconductor industry, for data centers and so on, you offer this, the capabilities of the young generation, but also relatively cheap energy sources and water sources. And I don't know whether you want to say one, because it was featured in Financial Times, one word related to the special economic zone in your, which is one of the new features of your country.
Well, there's another unique feature in ASEAN, relatively the most peaceful in the world and fastest growing economy. And Professor Schwab, I'm not exaggerating if I say that I'm yet to see the collaboration, trust, and relationship between leaders in ASEAN, which to me is exceptional, unrivaled. We trust one another, we communicate as friends easily, and that helps. So we have, first, the energy transition. We, of course, not just offering cheap energy, water, but for data centers. But we see if you come in and you must say AI, you have a center of excellence, so it must be an added feature. Then we have the ASEAN energy grid from China, also in China, then Thailand, then Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, to the Philippines and Sarawak undersea cable. That to fulfill the present requirements of alternative energy, the green energy. Then we have to work with Singapore closely. And I think this, again, is unique because not many countries have that sort of arrangement. It's just not a normal economic zone. It's based like a total commitment of both governments to develop this as our center, both in the interest of Malaysia and Singapore. And it's giving a lot of attention and support now. Then we work with Indonesia to collaborate in most of our industries together. You know, in the South Thailand, there's one relatively poor area, some problems, and we have North Malaya, which is also relatively poor. So in my discussions with the Prime Minister, and we are now focusing on that development. So to me, I'm very excited. It's not me just assuming chairmanship of ASEAN, but I think the spirit of collaboration and I should say esprit de corps between these leaders is unique, and we want to prove. Now we realize that with United States cumulatively is of course the largest investor into Malaysia, but now growing closeness and investment and trade with China. So we navigate is quite a difficult subject that you answer. Don't ask me that question. And then we also know that we had to utilize, for example, the EU. CPTPP with UK has been resolved last week. With the EU, we want to have fast track. So the FTA, because we are a trading nation, we need to have all the mechanisms in place to be able to attract investment and to facilitate trade.
I just want to underline, Prime Minister, we met last time in Laos in October at the ASEAN summit, and I can underline what you just said, the high quality of leadership in the ASEAN countries. Now, in many ways, this is a grouping of where there's still high differences in terms of GDP development and so on. Can you tell us what are your main objectives for your ASEAN presidency this year?
I made reference to earlier on the issue of energy, ASEAN energy grid, which is of course towards energy transition and new energy. Also connectivity, because connectivity means it has to be consistent with inclusiveness and sustainability. That means the poorer areas, either within one country or within states, will be dealt with. If we talk about connectivity, then it can be from we were in Vietnam, Laos, to Vietnam, to Malaysia, to Indonesia. I mean, we work as one. So digital strategy for the entire region. But we are, me personally, you know, I've endured some sufferings because a very strong position vis-a-vis values and the inequality, the gross inequity between the very rich and very poor, both in terms of region and in terms of rural heartland and the urban poor. So the focus must be, therefore, consistent for the region on the trying to raise the floor and concomitantly raise the ceiling. So both the floor and the ceiling together as one ASEAN.
Prime Minister, you are very well known also to care very much for human rights, for sustainability. So I ask you two questions. The first one is, what let's say, takes you to sleep at night if you think of the human rights situation in the world? You have been very outspoken, very engaged. And second, with now the cancellation of the Paris Agreement by the US, will you maintain your commitment to green development in Malaysia?
Well, first on the issue of human rights, justice, anti-colonization, and exploitation harlop harlop, which was the slogan in the 70s. I've not forgotten that. I think we should remain consistent. You see, there is trust deficit. There is certainly the issue of deficit in terms of moral, ethical principles in governance. There is what I consider as hypocrisy, politics of ambivalence. But what do we see? So we will have to have a showcase. Malaysia is a multiracial country. Now we can showcase that we are the Muslim majority with strong ethnic Chinese and ethnic Indians, and the tribal groups in Sabah, Sarawak can be taken as one great family. Then we showcase in that manner. We have a problem in Myanmar. ASEAN has reached this 5-point consensus, but we are very aggressively engaging with Myanmar now on the principles which, of course, cannot ignore issue of human rights. On the issue of climate change, doesn't matter whether it's the Paris Accord or international recognition. We have to take measures to save our country and our society. And if it requires us to observe strictly the understanding which is tied to the Paris Agreement, we have to honor. And I think it is not a matter of honoring that. We are working at a faster pace. Yeah. That's why we have the ASEAN energy grid. It's a faster pace than what was projected earlier. And if we can reach that in the next few years, then of course it's more economic, it's cheaper energy, but it meets the requirements of the Paris Accord. So it doesn't matter whether, well, it does matter to the world, unfortunately, that we need countries, rich countries, industrial countries, that cost most of the burden to undertake some of these measures. What they promised, they have not honored. But we can go on complaining, but we have to start doing it. So you ask me on the issue of human rights, human climate, is it because of international understanding? No. It is what is our commitment, our values dictate for the sake of humanity that we undertake bold, tough measures beginning from our home.
You have our full commitment. We still, even more, we have to fight for those values which are so essential, actually, for the survival of humankind. Let me ask you, of course, there's a lot of discussion about US-China rivalry and the new role the global South is playing now in the world. How do you see Malaysia here positioned? You are one of the strong voices, actually, of the global South. Do you see Malaysia being a member of the BRICS group, or do you want to maintain your independence? How do you see the direction of the role of Malaysia in this new geopolitical context?
in all humility, so sure you are better qualified to answer that question. My only contribution would say this. We are an emerging economy. We in ASEAN has this principle of centrality. We engage strongly with the United States traditionally. We will continue to do so. China is an important neighbor. Do not have problems. Of course, people highlight the issue of South China Sea, the border. But may I remind you that Malaysia is a maritime country. We have excellent relations with Singapore. We still have border issues with them. We have excellent relations. I treat the Thais as my family members, the leaders. But still we have some border issues with them. So is with Indonesia, with the Philippines. We don't go to war. We don't threaten. We don't have... We do discuss. We get a little angry, but we do focus on the economic fundamentals and move on. And why is it that we must then single out China as an issue? I mean, that's my only contention. Do I have an issue about it? Yes. But do I have a problem? No. Do we have any undesired tensions? No. So I think we have to proceed with China because it's an important player. They have been very reasonable with us. They take us seriously, more seriously than many of the countries of our old allies and friends. But as a region, as a country that is fiercely independent and maintains centrality, we are now engaging much more with EU. Yeah. And we have been saying the EU, this is a new groupie that we have to work together. With BRICS, yes, why not? I mean, the Global South have to take a stand because the international financial infrastructure through the IMF needs to reform. United Nations need to reform. We talk about democracy, but we refuse to accept democratic principles and democratic accountability. WTA need to make some adjustments. That's all they were asking for. We're not going to war. We still work under the present mechanisms. So that's why, to me, BRICS is important. At least there's a mechanism. We talk, not a zero-sum game. Malaysia is a trading nation. We survive, we manage as a trading nation, and to be as friendly as possible with everyone, but we take our position on issue human rights, on issue of justice, or issues humanity.
I agree. That makes you very special, Prime Minister. Now, I come back to ASEAN, and there is a vision of ASEAN 2045. And my question is, do you want to become a group similar to the European Union with a common currency, with an internal market? What could you enlighten us how you would see ASEAN in 20 years from now?
ASEAN leaders are here, so I'm going to be careful. But what consensus have we reached? We have been successful in the past on geopolitical, diplomatic, but we realize in my exchanges with all prime ministers and presidents of ASEAN, look, we have to enhance, what does the Americans say, enhance, the pronunciation is an issue, intra-ASEAN trade, and work together to complement one another. So that is comparative advantage. So the economic fundamentals in terms of trade, investment, to me is important, and the way we negotiate with other countries or regions. But whether we want to then emerge to become like EU is something that we have not explored. Our advantage is to study EU, the successes and the limitations, and we are not too concerned about the political setup. We are more concerned about the economic collaboration. From my understanding, talking to, Bombo Marcos, to Prabowo, to Pongkenton, or to Thailand, and my other neighbors, Lawrence, Tuan Sultan Brunei, who is most senior, our main interest is to focus on the economic fundamentals. Whatever it takes, digitalization, AI, and energy transition, investments, trade, I mean, that has been the focus.
That's a unifying factor because at the moment you also have to house house, if I mean bring into the same house different political systems in the ASEAN countries. Let me maybe conclude this conversation with a question. You have such an experience, and you are admired for what you are doing. What would you wish a political leader, what would be the main characteristics of a political leader today, in today's world, which is fast moving? What do you feel? What makes a successful political leader today?
I have not been successful in the past. I've spent more time in jail than outside. So, but in the last 2 years, of course, I've been given the mandate. I think the issue of governance, democratic accountability is important. Leadership, to me, must set that example. Yeah. Because countries are destroyed because of arrogance, because of corruption, and that is why what I intend to do in Malaysia is first to correct the issue of governance. We inherit some issues, some scandals of the past. So we have to be very rigid on that, which is challenging, particularly when corruption is deemed to be systemic. So tender process must be transparent, and an effective anti-corruption commission with adequate legislation and adequate powers. And I think that should be a start. But the humility of leadership, because political leaders, by the way, we have been given all the praises, tend to forget that this is a learning curve, and the humility to acknowledge that we have limitations. What do I know about AI? Unless I'm prepared to listen to the experts. But what is fundamental to my mind, which I will never compromise, is the value, dignity of men and women. Because I experience what unfreedom is, of torture in prison or in the lockup. So I think no one should be and deserves to be treated in that manner. And this, if you talk about dignity of men and women, then their opportunities, their education, their health, their welfare must be given adequate protection. So these gross inequalities, to me, the unbridled capitalism must come to an end as far as Malaysia is concerned. Of course, it's generally capitalistic in the system, but then there must not be this issue of oligarchy and cronyism that would destroy the basic fundamentals, what we mean by freedom and democratic accountability.
Yeah. That's, Prime Minister, that's why I personally prefer to talk about entrepreneurialism and not capitalism. I think yes. Entrepreneurs, and I usually would define it as stakeholder entrepreneurialism, which means the World Economic Forum coined a motto, I think 40 years ago, shortly after I had created the organization, which is entrepreneurialism yes. in the global public interest, which means prosperity is driven by entrepreneurs, and you need this innovative force of business and industry, but ultimately it always has to serve the global society. And on this note, I want to thank you for making yourself available for this discussion. I'm looking very much forward to continued success, and I'm looking very much forward to seeing you, hopefully, when you conduct, I think you have 2 summits, one in May and one in October. And we wish you, on behalf of everybody here, we wish you all the best. Thank you very much.